Everything at my brother's wedding felt flawless until the third day. My husband suddenly leaned in and said, "We have to go right now." I froze. "What are you even saying?" Then he looked at me and asked, "You honestly didn't notice?" The bride, and what he revealed next made my stomach sink. You know, sometimes, life throws you a curveball so wild, so profoundly unbelievable, that your entire world just shatters. You think you know people, you trust your instincts, you build a life with certainty, and then, in a single, gut-wrenching moment, you realize it was all a devastating, calculated lie. I'm talking about a moment so shocking, so utterly devoid of truth, that it forces you to question everything you thought you knew about love, about family, and even about the simple, fundamental act of trusting someone. Because my brother Kyle's wedding, a day meant to be a fairy tale, a joyous celebration of new beginnings, turned into the scene of a shocking betrayal, a chilling deception that threatened to unravel our entire family. I'm talking about a wound so deep, so expertly inflicted, that it still makes my blood run cold. Because there I was at the post-wedding brunch, surrounded by apparent happiness, when my husband, Michael, leaned over, his voice tight with an urgency that pierced straight through the celebratory hum, and whispered, "We need to leave. Now." My heart stopped. I knew, in that instant, with a certainty that left me breathless, that something was catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. What followed next was a brutal descent into a nightmare I still struggle to process, a story that felt ripped straight from the darkest corners of a crime novel. But before I dive deeper into this absolutely insane, heartbreaking saga, let me ask you, have you ever just felt in your gut that something was completely off about someone your family trusted, someone who seemed utterly perfect, like a person without a single flaw? Because trust me, your instincts are often right, and ignoring them can lead to devastating consequences. You might just want to keep listening to this one. My name is Audrey, I'm 32, and for 5 wonderful years, I've been happily married to Michael. He's my rock, my anchor, the kind of partner you dream of. And my brother, Kyle, 30, has always been my best friend, my confidant, the boisterous, loving, golden-hearted center of our family. He's the kind of guy who makes friends wherever he goes, genuinely good to his core. So, when Kyle called, his voice bubbling with pure, unadulterated excitement, to announce his destination wedding in the breathtaking Napa Valley, Michael and I were beyond thrilled. We envisioned a picture-perfect ceremony amidst rolling vineyards, a joyous reunion of family and friends, a celebration of true love. And for the first 2 days, everything was perfect, a sun-drenched dream come to life. We arrived at the Silverado Resort on a glorious Thursday afternoon, 3 days before the actual wedding. Kyle had truly gone all out, renting a massive private estate on the property, with enough luxurious rooms for our immediate family and the entire wedding party. The grounds were utterly breathtaking. Sprawling vineyards stretched to the horizon, manicured gardens burst with vibrant colors, and the majestic view of the mountains made you feel like you'd stepped directly into a fairy tale. As we pulled up to the grand estate, I spotted my parents, Grace and Thomas, chatting animatedly with Kyle on the front steps. Dad was gesturing enthusiastically, the way he always does when he's genuinely excited about something big. Mom looked radiant in a flowing summer dress, her silver-streaked hair catching the golden California sunlight. "There they are!" Kyle shouted, his face splitting into a wide grin, bounding down the steps to greet us. My brother had always been the energetic one, and at 30, he still possessed the infectious enthusiasm of a kid on Christmas morning. He pulled me into a bear hug that lifted me clean off my feet, squeezing me tight. "Where's the lucky bride?" I asked after he'd set me down and given Michael a firm handshake that quickly turned into a half-hug. "Getting her hair done with her bridesmaids," Kyle beamed, his eyes shining. "You'll see her at the welcome dinner tonight. You guys are going to love Madison. She's absolutely incredible." His conviction was so absolute, so pure, it made my heart swell for him. I'd only met Madison twice before. Once at Christmas for a quick, polite dinner, and again at their engagement party 3 months prior. Both times, she'd been perfectly pleasant, impeccably poised, but our interactions had been brief, almost fleeting. Kyle had met her just 10 months ago at a charity fundraiser in San Francisco. Their romance had been a whirlwind, a dizzying blur. Engaged after 5 months, and now here we were, just 5 more months later, at their extravagant destination wedding. A little fast, maybe, a tiny voice in the back of my head had whispered, but Kyle was so happy, so utterly smitten, that I'd easily dismissed it. Your room is on the 2nd floor, East Wing, Kyle explained, effortlessly helping us with our luggage. Mom and Dad are in the West Wing, and Madison and I are in the separate guest house because tradition and all that. The room was, as expected, gorgeous. A massive king-size bed, a private balcony overlooking the vineyards, and a bathroom bigger than our first apartment combined. As I unpacked, Michael flopped onto the bed, sinking into the Egyptian cotton sheets. "This place must be costing a fortune," he remarked, running a hand over the luxurious fabric. "Madison's parents are covering most of it," I explained, pulling out a dress. "They're loaded. Her dad owns like half of Seattle or something, some kind of business mogul." That evening, the welcome dinner was held in the estate's sprawling courtyard, transformed into an enchanted wonderland. Fairy lights hung from every tree, casting a magical glow, and long tables were arranged in a U shape, laden with gourmet food. I spotted Madison the moment we walked in. She was wearing a simple, elegant white cocktail dress, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. She was undeniably stunning, tall, slender, with a kind of effortless beauty that, if I'm honest, usually made me feel instantly inadequate. "Audrey!" she exclaimed when she saw me, rushing over with arms outstretched, her smile dazzling. "I'm so happy you're here. Kyle says you two were inseparable growing up. I want to hear all the embarrassing stories." There was something almost too practiced about her enthusiasm, a carefully orchestrated performance, but I chalked it up to understandable pre-wedding nerves, the excitement of the moment. I introduced her to Michael, whom she'd only briefly met at the engagement party. "The handsome doctor," she purred, her eyes sparkling. "Kyle told me you just made attending physician at Chicago Memorial. That's incredibly impressive." Michael seemed pleasantly surprised, a faint smile touching his lips that she'd remembered such a specific detail. "Thank you," he replied, "and congratulations on finishing your MBA at Stanford. Kyle tells us you're already fielding multiple job offers." "Oh, it was nothing," Madison said with a dismissive wave, her humility almost too perfect. "My father has connections in the business world, so I've been fortunate with opportunities." Throughout dinner, I watched Madison work the room like a seasoned politician. She seemed to know everyone's names, remembered obscure details about their lives, and made each person feel uniquely special, utterly charmed. She was particularly attentive to my father, asking thoughtful, probing questions about his investment firm, and seeming genuinely interested in his detailed answers. "She's quite the charmer," Michael whispered to me as we watched Madison throw her head back in laughter at something my dad had said, his own face alight with approval. "She makes Kyle happy," I replied, forcing a smile. "That's all that matters." Or, so I desperately tried to convince myself. The rehearsal the next day went smoothly, a meticulously choreographed dance. Madison was a vision of efficiency, guiding everyone through their positions with the precision of a military commander, all disguised under a veneer of breezy, effortless calm. But then, there was an odd moment. I went to use the bathroom in the main house and overheard Madison talking to someone in one of the bedrooms. Her voice sounded distinctly different, harder, more clipped, utterly devoid of her usual melodic warmth. "I don't care what it takes, just handle it," she was saying, her tone sharp and unyielding. "We've come too far to mess this up now." When she noticed me in the hallway, her expression changed instantly, softening into the warm, practiced smile I'd grown accustomed to. "Audrey, I was just dealing with a minor flower emergency. Nothing to worry about." Her voice had returned to its usual, lilting tone. As she brushed past me, I noticed she was holding a phone in a striking blue case. Later that day, I saw her texting on a different phone, this one with a bold red case. It struck me as undeniably odd. A small, jarring note, but I dismissed it. Lots of people had multiple phones. I rationalized. One for work, one personal. That night at the rehearsal dinner, Madison gave a touching, tear-jerking speech about how she'd always dreamed of finding a partner like Kyle, and how profoundly welcomed she felt by our family. My mother openly wiped away tears, and my father looked on with beaming, approving eyes. Everything seemed utterly perfect, the image of a happy family completed. But as Michael and I walked back to our room that night, a persistent, icy sliver of unease burrowed into my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was subtly, profoundly off. The second day of wedding festivities began with a champagne breakfast on the terrace. Madison was already there when Michael and I arrived, looking incredibly fresh and radiant despite having been up late with the rehearsal dinner. "Good morning, you too," she called out cheerfully, her smile bright as the California sun. "I've asked the chef to prepare something special for us today." As we ate, I couldn't help but notice Madison checking her phone frequently, stepping away at regular intervals to take calls. At one point, I went inside to grab a sweater and accidentally walked in on her having what appeared to be an intensely hushed conversation in one of the side rooms. "Listen, we can't afford any mistakes," she was saying in a low, urgent tone. "Everything needs to be in place by Sunday. The accounts should be accessible by then." When she noticed me, she quickly ended the call, her eyes wide with a manufactured surprise. "Wedding planner," she explained with an exaggerated eye roll. "There's always some crisis to manage." I nodded, though I distinctly remember that her wedding planner was a man named Jeffrey, and the voice I'd heard her call Sweetie had definitely been female. Back at breakfast, I noticed Madison was now using a phone with a different case than earlier. The blue one had been replaced by the red one I'd seen yesterday. When she stepped away again, I mentioned this to Michael. "Maybe she has separate phones for wedding stuff and personal use," he suggested, but I could tell, by the slight furrow in his brow, that he found it as odd as I did. The day continued with various pre-wedding activities. Madison had arranged a wine-tasting tour for the wedding guests, while the bridal party was scheduled for final fittings and preparations. As one of the bridesmaids, though not the maid of honor, that coveted position went to Madison's cousin, Stephanie. I spent most of the afternoon in a flurry of dress adjustments and hair trials. In the fitting room, I observed Madison's interactions with the other bridesmaids. She was controlling in a way that wasn't immediately obvious, a subtle, insidious manipulation. Suggestions that were actually commands, compliments with subtle, almost imperceptible critiques embedded within them. "Alyssa, honey, that hairstyle looks so much better than what you initially wanted," she said to one of the bridesmaids, her smile unwavering. "Thank goodness we changed it." Alyssa smiled weakly in response, a hint of unease in her eyes. When the hairstylist, a sweet, soft-spoken woman, suggested a slight change to Madison's elaborate updo, the bride's eyes flashed with a momentary, terrifying anger before she composed herself with practiced ease. "I think we should stick to the original plan," she said with a tight, brittle smile. "It's my special day, after all." During a brief lull in the fittings, I found myself chatting with Stephanie, the maid of honor. When I mentioned Madison's Stanford MBA, Stephanie looked genuinely confused. "Stanford? I thought she went to UCLA," she said, then quickly added, almost too quickly, "But maybe I'm mixing things up. We have so many cousins, it's hard to keep track." Before I could ask for clarification, Madison appeared as if on cue, linking her arm through Stephanie's, her smile tight. "What are you two gossiping about?" she asked lightly, but there was an unmistakable edge to her voice, a predatory curiosity. "Just getting to know each other," I replied with a strained smile. Later that afternoon, I witnessed an interaction that left me feeling distinctly uncomfortable, solidifying a knot of dread in my stomach. The wedding planner, Jeffrey, a harried but competent man, approached Madison with a concern about the seating arrangement. Madison's response was immediate and harsh, her voice a whip-crack of disdain. "I don't pay you to bring me problems, Jeffrey. I pay you to solve them," she snapped, her voice cold and dismissive, stripped of all warmth. When she noticed me watching, her demeanor changed instantly, a chameleon-like shift. "Jeffrey, I'm so sorry," she cooed, touching his arm gently, her voice back to its melodic tone. "Pre-wedding stress is getting to me. Please arrange the tables however you think best." Jeffrey looked relieved but utterly wary, like a dog that's been unexpectedly kicked by its owner, still flinching at the hand that now offered solace. That evening, during the bridesmaids' dinner, Madison excused herself multiple times to take calls. Each time she returned, she was slightly more tense, her bright smiles and enthusiastic toasts feeling increasingly forced, brittle. As we were leaving the restaurant, I noticed Michael waiting in the lobby. He'd been at the groomsmen's dinner with Kyle, but they'd apparently finished early. "How was your evening?" I asked as we walked back to our room, the chill in the air matching the one in my gut. "Interesting," he replied thoughtfully, his brow furrowed. "Kyle's friends are great, but what?" Michael hesitated, then sighed. "It's probably nothing. Just that some of the stories Kyle tells about how they met don't quite match what Madison has told people." "Like what?" I pressed, a cold premonition seizing me. "Well, Kyle says they met at a charity auction where he outbid her for a vacation package. But one of her friends mentioned tonight that Madison always tells the story of meeting him when she spilled coffee on him at a cafe." I frowned. "That is weird. Maybe they're remembering different encounters." Michael nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. Neither was I. As we prepared for bed that night, I found myself replaying every interaction I'd had with Madison since arriving. The small inconsistencies in her stories, the moments of mask slipping that revealed something harder, colder underneath her perfect exterior. But then I reminded myself, again, that wedding stress could bring out the worst in anyone, and I was probably being overly critical of the woman my brother loved so fiercely. Still, as I drifted off to an uneasy sleep, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something wasn't quite right with the soon-to-be newest member of our family. That nagging voice, unheard but insistent, whispered of deception. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with just enough of a gentle breeze to keep the temperature perfectly mild. From my window, I could see the staff making final preparations in the garden where the ceremony would take place. Rows of elegant white chairs were being arranged, and an arch of fragrant roses and lush greenery was being meticulously constructed at the far end. Despite my lingering concerns from the previous day, I was determined to focus on the positive, to push aside the unsettling thoughts. This was Kyle's day, and he was clearly head over heels for Madison, his adoration shining in every glance. Who was I to question his judgment based on a few odd moments, a few strange observations? The bridal suite was a flurry of activity when I arrived. Madison sat calmly in the center of the joyful chaos, a vision of serene beauty. A makeup artist worked carefully on her flawless face, while a hairstylist put the finishing touches on her elaborate updo. She looked utterly stunning, like a goddess. "Audrey," she exclaimed when she saw me, her voice radiating warmth. "Come sit by me. I want to give you something." She gestured to a small, velvet box on the vanity. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single, lustrous pearl. "It's to thank you for welcoming me into your family," Madison said, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror, her gaze seeming incredibly sincere. "Kyle tells me you're his rock, so your approval means everything to me." I was genuinely touched by the gesture and immediately felt a fresh wave of guilt for my suspicions. "It's beautiful, Madison." "Thank you." The ceremony itself was picture perfect, a scene straight out of a glossy magazine. Kyle looked incredibly handsome and nervously excited in his tuxedo. And when Madison walked down the aisle in her exquisite designer gown, there were audible gasps from the guests, a collective murmur of admiration. My brother's face as he watched her approach was a mixture of awe and adoration that brought tears to my eyes, real tears this time, for the beauty of the moment, for his palpable happiness. Their vows were personal and incredibly moving. Madison spoke about finding her forever home in Kyle and in our family, her voice breaking with emotion at just the right, poignant moments. As I watched them exchange rings, I desperately pushed aside my nagging doubts. Clearly, this woman loved my brother, deeply and truly. She had to. At the reception, Madison was the epitome of the perfect bride. She floated from table to table, a gracious hostess, charming everyone she spoke with, making them feel like the most important person in the room. She was particularly attentive to my parents, making sure their glasses were always full and drawing them into animated conversations with her family members. I still put family members in mental quotation marks because I'd noticed something odd. Madison seemed to have very few actual relatives at the wedding. There was Stephanie, the maid of honor, supposedly her cousin, and an older couple, introduced as her aunt and uncle. Her parents were there, of course. Her father, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair, who spoke little but watched everything with keen, observant eyes. Where are all of Madison's friends from Stanford? I asked Michael as we danced, a new seed of doubt beginning to sprout. Or her childhood friends. It seems like most of the guests are either her parents' friends or Kyle's people. Michael's brow furrowed slightly. I was thinking the same thing, he murmured. And have you noticed how her accent seems to shift slightly depending on who she's talking to? With your parents, she has a more pronounced West Coast inflection, but with her uncle, her speech patterns were distinctly different, almost harder. Maybe she's just one of those people who unconsciously mirrors others, I suggested, though I didn't entirely believe it myself. It was too precise, too controlled. As the night progressed, I observed Madison carefully steering certain people toward or away from each other, a subtle, almost imperceptible choreography. She seemed particularly intent on keeping my father engaged in conversation with her own father. They appeared to be deep in discussion about lucrative investment opportunities, my father looking increasingly interested as the evening wore on. At one point, I overheard a fragment of their conversation that sent a fresh jolt of unease through me. Thomas, with your expertise in sustainable energy investments and my connections in the Asian markets, Madison's father was saying, his voice smooth as silk, we could create something revolutionary. My father, who had indeed made his fortune in green energy investments, was nodding enthusiastically, his eyes alight with genuine interest. I've been looking for an entry point into those markets for years. The regulatory hurdles have been substantial. I have ways around those, Madison's father replied, his smile widening, but in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. A cold, calculating gleam instead. Later, I noticed Michael taking photos with his phone. Not just the usual reception snapshots, but deliberate images of Madison with different groups of people, almost like he was documenting something. When I asked him about it, he shrugged, a little too casually. Just capturing memories, he said. But there was a tension in his voice, a focused intensity that I recognized from his most difficult hospital cases, when he suspected a complex diagnosis but needed more hard evidence before confirming it. The celebration continued until well after midnight. By the time Michael and I returned to our room, I was utterly exhausted, but also profoundly unsettled. Something about the day, despite its apparent perfection, had felt fundamentally off. Did you enjoy yourself? Michael asked as we got ready for bed. Yes, I said automatically, then amended my voice flat. Mostly. Did you? He hesitated before answering, his gaze distant. It was an interesting day. That non-answer hung heavy between us as we fell into an uneasy sleep, both too tired to probe further, but too disturbed to discuss it properly. And that brings us back to the post-wedding brunch, the point where our fairy tale shattered. Most guests, despite the late night, made an appearance, though many were moving slowly and drinking the offered Bloody Marys and mimosas with grateful, almost desperate enthusiasm. Kyle and Madison were seated at the center table, accepting congratulations, looking appropriately tired but undeniably happy, playing their roles to perfection. Madison had transformed once again, now embodying the role of gracious new wife, wearing a simple white sundress with her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, an image of approachable elegance. Michael, as I mentioned, had been quiet all morning, constantly checking his phone and stepping away for brief, hushed calls. When I pressed him about who he was talking to, he gave vague answers about checking in with the hospital. This was profoundly unusual for him, a stark deviation from his usual presence during our rare vacation time together. We took our seats at the family table with my parents, who were still glowing with pride and happiness for Kyle. Isn't she just wonderful? My mother sighed contentedly, nodding toward Madison, who was laughing with one of the groomsmen, her mirth sounding a little forced to my now attuned ears. So accomplished and poised. Kyle really found himself a catch. My father, his voice dropping to a lower, more conspiratorial tone, added, and her father's connections could be extremely valuable. We had a fascinating conversation last night about some potential joint ventures. He's very keen on getting into sustainable energy, and my expertise is exactly what he needs. Dad, I interjected, a cold prickle of alarm making me shiver despite the warm California air. You're not actually considering investing with someone you just met, are you? My father looked slightly offended, his brow furrowing. Robert isn't just someone, Audrey, he replied, his voice firm. He's built an impressive portfolio across multiple industries. We're having lunch next week in Chicago to discuss specifics. This could be huge. Before I could voice my growing unease, Michael's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, and I watched his expression harden, his jaw tightening, his eyes narrowing with grim determination. "Excuse me," he murmured, standing up abruptly and walking away from the table, his posture radiating tension. Through the large window overlooking the lawn, I could see him pacing, his conversation appearing increasingly intense, his body language taut with barely contained frustration. When he returned about 15 minutes later, his face was set, grim, a shadow falling over his eyes that spoke of profound distress. Just as he sat back down, Madison approached our table, her smile bright and effortless, yet I now saw the subtle, practiced calculation behind it. "Thomas," she said to my father, her voice perfectly modulated, "I meant to ask you about your thoughts on the Sherman portfolio approach to diversification. Dad mentioned you've had remarkable success with similar strategies." My father, visibly impressed by her detailed knowledge, immediately launched into a passionate explanation of his proprietary investment philosophy, a strategy he developed over decades, one that was highly personal and not publicly available. How would Madison know about it? The question screamed in my mind, a siren of pure terror. As my father and Madison discussed intricate investment terms that went completely over my head, Michael leaned close to my ear, his voice urgent, a low, guttural whisper that cut through the pleasant din. "We need to leave. Now." My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I spun to him in surprise, my eyes wide. "What? We can't just leave in the middle of brunch. The wedding was yesterday." My voice was a low, desperate hiss, barely audible over the clinking of glasses. "Trust me, Audrey, we need to go. I'll explain everything, but not here. It's too dangerous." Something in his tone, a desperate conviction I rarely heard even in his high-stakes medical profession, made my stomach clench with a terrifying, icy anxiety. "Is it the hospital? An emergency?" "No," he said, his eyes flicking meaningfully toward Madison, a silent, chilling accusation that made my blood run cold. "It's about the bride." "What the hell are you talking about?" I hissed, trying desperately to keep my voice down, my mind racing, scrambling for any logical explanation. Michael's jaw tightened even further, a muscle twitching in his cheek. "You really didn't notice the bride? She's not who she says she is. Not even close." My blood ran cold, a sudden, horrifying premonition chilling me to the bone, turning my insides to ice. What he said next made my stomach drop into a bottomless pit, the world tilting on its axis. "Madison Wilson doesn't exist. Your brother married a con artist who's been meticulously targeting your family, specifically your father, for 4 months." I stared at him, utterly disbelieving, my mind refusing to accept the words. "That's ridiculous. How could you possibly know that? That's insane." My voice was barely a whisper, trembling with a mixture of fear and outrage, a desperate need for him to tell me it was a cruel joke. "I'll show you everything, but we need privacy now. We need to leave this place immediately." Michael stood abruptly, his composure unwavering, putting on a perfectly convincing show of apologetic concern. "I'm so sorry, everyone," he announced, his voice carrying just enough to reach our table. "But I just got called in for emergency surgery. A critical patient. We need to head back to Chicago right away." My mother looked genuinely disappointed, her face falling. "Oh, must you? Can't another doctor handle it?" "It's a complicated case that I've been managing for weeks," Michael explained smoothly, his doctor's calm composure serving him well. "I wouldn't leave if it wasn't absolutely necessary." I apologized for cutting short the celebration. I watched in a daze, a horrifying, surreal haze, as Michael made our hurried excuses to Kyle and Madison. Madison's expression was perfectly appropriate, disappointed but understanding, the picture of the concerned new sister-in-law. Her eyes, however, seemed to glitter with an almost imperceptible triumph. "I was hoping we'd have more time to get to know each other better," she said, embracing me, her words dripping with manufactured warmth. "But we'll have plenty of opportunities when you visit us in San Francisco. Do keep in touch." As she hugged me, I caught a glimpse of something in her eyes, fleeting and chilling, A flash of cold, calculating assessment, like a predator sizing up its prey. It was gone in an instant, but I saw it. It sent a fresh, deep chill down my spine. 20 minutes later, we were in our rental car, speeding away from the sprawling, deceptive estate, the fairy tale veneer of Napa, crumbling into dust behind us. The moment we were out of sight, Michael drove for a few more silent, tense miles before pulling over at a scenic overlook, the vineyard stretching out beneath a deceptively peaceful azure sky. I turned to him, my voice trembling with suppressed fury and terror. "Explain. Now." He took out his phone, his movements deliberate, and pulled up a folder of images and documents. "I knew something was off the first day we arrived, Audrey," he began, his voice calm but resolute, the clinical precision of a doctor delivering a difficult diagnosis. Little inconsistencies in her stories, the way she subtly manipulated conversations. It reminded me of a patient I had last year who turned out to be faking symptoms to get medications. My instincts, the ones I rely on in the ER to spot deception, were screaming that something was fundamentally wrong with her. "So, you decided she was a con artist because she reminded you of a drug-seeking patient?" I asked, incredulously, my mind struggling, failing, to grasp the enormity of what he was implying, to reconcile this horror with the woman Kyle had just married. "No," Michael replied, his eyes meeting mine, firm and unwavering. "I decided to look into her background because my instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. After the rehearsal dinner, when those odd stories from Kyle's friends surfaced, I called a college friend who works in private security. He owed me a favor, a big one, and I asked him to run a quick, discreet background check. I told him to prioritize anything related to aliases or financial fraud. You investigated our brother's fiancée without telling anyone." I was stunned, a fresh wave of disbelief washing over me, tinged with a flicker of resentment at his secrecy, even though I knew it was for the right reasons. "I was hoping to be proven wrong, Audrey," Michael said, his voice softer now, tinged with regret. "I desperately wanted to be wrong. But what came back this morning confirmed my worst suspicions. Look!" He handed me his phone, the screen glowing with a damning truth. On the screen was a driver's license for a woman named Erica Donovan. The photo was unmistakably Madison, though with darker hair, her features just subtly different, a more severe angle to her jaw, an almost predatory glint in her eyes. "This is from 3 years ago in Boston," Michael explained, his voice flat. "She was married to a hedge fund manager named Lawrence Patton. She disappeared with nearly $2 million from their joint accounts right after he introduced her to his highest-value clients and investors. The pattern is already established." I scrolled through more images, my hands starting to tremble uncontrollably. Madison with different hair colors, different names, standing beside different men, their faces beaming with trust, with adoration, utterly oblivious to the viper in their midst. News articles about elaborate investment scams and missing funds. Each headline was a hammer blow to my understanding of reality, shattering every illusion. "This can't be real," I whispered, tears blurring my vision, though the overwhelming, damning evidence in my hands was undeniable and irrefutable. "My friend was able to find 3 confirmed identities she's used in the past 5 years," Michael continued, his voice grim, detached, as if reciting a medical report. "Madison Wilson, Erica Donovan, and Catherine Miller. Each time, the pattern is eerily the same. She marries into money, integrates herself seamlessly into the family's financial and social affairs, builds trust, then disappears with as much as she can take before anyone realizes what's truly happening. She's a professional, Audrey. But how did she target Kyle?" I asked, my voice cracking, thick with a rising wave of despair. "He doesn't have millions. He's comfortable, but not wealthy. He's just a software engineer." Michael's gaze hardened, his face etched with grim resignation. "Kyle was never the target, Audrey," he said, the words a cold, brutal statement of fact that pierced straight through my heart. "Your father was. Kyle was just the way in. The easy, emotional access point. The bait." I sat in stunned, horrified silence, staring at the police reports, the news articles from local papers across the country, and even an FBI warning bulletin about a woman matching Madison's description, wanted for questioning in connection with multiple fraud cases. According to what my friend found, She's been operating for at least 7 years, Michael explained, his voice heavy with the weight of the grim discovery. She typically uses a team, people who pose as family members or business associates, to help establish her credibility, to weave this elaborate web of deceit. The cousin, I murmured, a sickening realization dawning on me as I remembered Stephanie's confusion about which university Madison had attended and her parents. Exactly, Michael confirmed. The man posing as her father has been identified in connection with at least 2 other scams. He's known for targeting wealthy business owners, gaining their trust, then proposing investment opportunities that turn out to be elaborate Ponzi schemes. I scrolled through more documents, my hands shaking uncontrollably now, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. There was a marriage certificate showing Erica Donovan had married Lawrence Petton in Boston 4 years ago. Another showed Catherine Miller had married Richard Hoffman in Seattle just 2 years ago. What happened to these men? I choked out, tears finally streaming down my face. Her other husbands? Michael's expression was grim, laced with a deep sympathy for their victims. Financial ruin. Mostly. Petton lost nearly everything and had to declare bankruptcy. Hoffman managed to recover some of his assets because he caught on faster, but he still lost over $1 million. Their lives were utterly devastated. And now she's after Dad. I said, the terrible, horrifying reality finally, fully sinking in, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with a sickening thud. That's why she's been so focused on his business, asking all those specific questions about his investment strategies, flattering him so expertly. He mentioned at brunch that he's meeting with her next week to discuss investment opportunities. Michael nodded, a muscle ticking in his jaw, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. I'm guessing that meeting would have ended with him transferring substantial funds into accounts they control. It would have been the final, fatal step in their plan. I thought back to every odd moment, every fleeting inconsistency I dismissed. Madison's different phones, her shifting accent, the private, hushed conversations I'd overheard, her detailed, unsettling knowledge of my father's business, the way she had isolated Kyle, subtly from his friends. It all clicked into place with horrifying, devastating clarity. The woman my brother loved was a ghost, a fraud, a thief, meticulously crafted to destroy our family. We have to tell Kyle, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears, my heart breaking for my brother and my parents, for the profound emotional wreckage this revelation would cause, for the complete shattering of Kyle's trust. We need to be strategic about this, Audrey, Michael cautioned, his voice firm, pragmatic. People like Madison, or whatever her real name is, are practiced at deflecting accusations. They are masters of psychological manipulation. If we approach this wrong, if we just drop this bombshell without ironclad proof, she could easily disappear with whatever she's already managed to access. Or worse, she could convince your family that we're the ones lying, that we're jealous or crazy, that we're trying to sabotage Kyle's happiness. What do you suggest? I asked, utterly lost, my mind reeling, looking to him for direction, for any semblance of a plan. We need to gather more concrete, undeniable evidence, Michael replied, his gaze intense. Then we present everything at once. No warning, no chance for her to prepare a defense or an escape plan. We hit her with the full force of the truth, cold and hard. I nodded, though the thought of confronting Madison, of being the one to shatter Kyle's world so completely, filled me with a deep, consuming dread that left me feeling physically ill. How do we get more evidence? We're running out of time. Michael's eyes were sharp, analytical, already assessing the next move. Your father's accounts. Has Madison had any opportunity to access his financial information, his passwords, his account numbers? Any computer access? I thought hard, trying to recall every detail. Dad always keeps everything on his laptop, and he's pretty security conscious. He prides himself on it. But he did mention yesterday that he was showing Madison's father some projections for a potential joint venture. He could have left his laptop open or logged in somewhere accessible to them. We need to check if anything's been compromised, Audrey, Michael said, his urgency returning, his voice tight. And we need to move quickly. Based on what I've learned about her pattern, she usually makes her final move within days of the wedding, while everyone is still caught up in the emotional celebration, blinded by joy. We drove to a nearby town, a small, anonymous place, checking into a nondescript hotel to plan our next critical steps. While Michael continued communicating with his security contact, gathering more data, I called a close friend of mine, Jen, who worked in cybersecurity. Jen was incredibly smart, fiercely loyal, and owed my father a great deal. "Jen, I need a huge favor, a monumental one," I explained, my voice barely steady, giving her a very brief, incredibly shocking outline of the situation, careful to omit Kyle's name at first. Jen was speechless for a moment, then gasped, a sharp, choked sound. "Oh my God, Audrey! Kyle! Are you serious?" She immediately agreed to help, her voice filled with a quiet fury. My father had set her up with her first job out of college, mentored her, and she was fiercely grateful and protective of him. "I'll need his permission and his access credentials," she said, her voice grim professional. "This isn't exactly legal otherwise, and I need to be careful." I called my father, my voice strained but trying to sound casual, weaving a flimsy but believable story about Michael needing some complex investment advice for a colleague and asking if Jen, as a cybersecurity expert, could access his models as examples for a secure presentation. Dad, completely unsuspecting, still basking in the glow of the wedding and the prospect of new ventures, agreed without hesitation, providing the necessary information. 2 agonizing hours later, Jen called back, her voice tense, tight with professional alarm and personal concern. "Audrey, someone's been in his system," she confirmed, the words a chilling confirmation of our worst fears. "They installed a sophisticated keylogger 3 days ago. It's been capturing everything. Passwords, account numbers, email communications with his financial institutions. Everything. It's extensive." My blood ran cold, fear an icy river through my veins, freezing me in place. "Can you tell who did it?" "The intrusion came from a device on the same local network as your father." "So, someone physically present at the wedding venue, Audrey. Someone who had physical access. I've disabled the keylogger and changed all his critical passwords, but whoever did this already has a lot of information. They have everything they need to liquidate his accounts." I thanked Jen profusely, my voice thick with emotion, promising to explain everything later, begging her to keep it to herself for now. When I relayed this devastating information to Michael, his expression darkened to a storm cloud, his face etched with grim determination. "We need to go back now," he said, decisive, his voice cutting through the silence. "Tonight, before they have a chance to use what they've gathered. The window of opportunity for them to strike is closing, but so is ours." We drove back to the Silverado estate under the cloak of twilight, the setting sun casting long, ominous shadows across the now familiar grounds. We arrived just as the last guests were finishing their farewell dinner. I texted Kyle, asking him to meet us privately in the estate's library, saying only that it was urgent and concerned Madison. Kyle met us, his expression a mixture of lingering concern and palpable annoyance at our sudden departure and secretive return. "What's going on?" he demanded, his arms crossed. "Why did you leave so suddenly? And why all the secrecy? Madison's worried about you." I took a deep, fortifying breath, the words a bitter taste in my mouth, heavy with the impending heartbreak. "Kyle, what I'm about to tell you is going to be incredibly hard to hear. But we have undeniable evidence that Madison isn't who she claims to be. She's not who you think she is." His face immediately hardened, a mask of disbelief and anger already forming, his jaw clenching. "What are you talking about? Are you jealous? Has something happened to Michael at the hospital?" Michael stepped forward, his body rigid with controlled emotion, opening his laptop, the glowing screen illuminating his determined, grim face. "Madison Wilson doesn't exist, Kyle. The woman you married has used at least 3 different identities in the past 5 years. She's wanted for questioning in multiple fraud cases across the country. She's a professional con artist." Kyle's laugh was sharp, dismissive, laced with outrage, almost hysterical. "This is insane. You've both lost your minds. This is some sick joke. Please, Kyle, just look at what we've found." I pleaded, my voice trembling, gesturing to the screen, my eyes begging him to see the truth. For the next 20 minutes, Michael methodically, calmly, yet relentlessly showed Kyle everything. The multiple identities, The undeniable pattern of marriages followed by financial theft, the explicit, damning evidence of the keylogger on our father's computer, the FBI bulletins with Madison's face under a different name. With each new piece of information, with each document Michael scrolled through, my brother's face grew paler, the initial anger slowly draining, replaced by a devastating horror, a chilling emptiness. "This can't be real," he whispered, his voice barely audible, thick with shock. But I could see the doubt, the sickening, dawning realization creeping into his eyes. "We've been together for almost a year. I would have noticed something. I love her. She's very good at what she does, Kyle," Michael said gently. His voice softened with sympathy, though. His eyes remained firm. "These people are professionals. They create elaborate backstories. They manipulate emotions. And they have teams supporting their cons. They target specific vulnerabilities. If this is true," Kyle said, his voice breaking, shattering like glass, thick with profound, unbearable anguish, "then nothing about our relationship was real. Nothing. Not a single moment." The pain in his eyes was unbearable, a raw, gaping wound that tore at my own heart. I moved to embrace him, my own tears finally falling. But at that harrowing moment, the library door opened, interrupting our agonizing confession. My father stood there, looking confused, drawn by the hushed, intense voices emanating from the room. "What's going on in here?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "Madison said you all disappeared after dinner, Kyle. Is everything all right?" Kyle looked at me, a silent, desperate question in his eyes, a flicker of hesitation. I nodded, my own resolve hardening, knowing there was no turning back now. "Dad," he said, his voice steadier than I expected, laced with a new, steel-like determination that spoke of deep, profound hurt. "You need to see this. It's about Madison." My father's initial reaction to the evidence was almost identical to Kyle's, a wall of disbelief, followed quickly by a protective anger, not at Madison, but at us for making such outrageous, scandalous accusations against his new daughter-in-law. "Audrey, Michael, what in God's name are you implying? This is my son's wife. This is slander." But as Michael methodically, painstakingly walked him through everything we discovered, the undeniable police reports, the news articles, the FBI bulletins, the explicit evidence of the unauthorized access to his computer and financial accounts, the keylogger, my father's expression slowly, terrifyingly shifted. From initial anger to concern, to deep, cold suspicion, and finally, to a grim, chilling understanding. His face became a mask of cold fury, a terrible realization dawning in his eyes. "We need to confront her," my father said, his voice hard, like flint, in a way I'd rarely, if ever, heard him speak. "Now, before this goes any further, before she does anything else." "We should involve the police immediately," Michael suggested, ever the pragmatist, focusing on procedure and evidence. Dad shook his head, a decisive, almost dangerous glint in his eyes. "Not yet. First, I want to hear what she has to say for herself, face to face. I want to see her explain this." Kyle, who had been silent for several minutes, staring blankly at a wedding photo on his phone, his face a canvas of devastation, spoke suddenly, his voice raspy. "I want to be the one to confront her. Alone." I responded immediately, alarm spiking through me, fear for his safety overriding everything else. "Absolutely not. These people are dangerous, Kyle. You don't know what they're capable of." "She's my wife," he said, his voice cracking on the last word, thick with a profound, aching sorrow. Or at least I thought she was. If anyone is going to demand the truth from her, it should be me. I deserve that much. After some intense negotiation, filled with tense whispers and desperate pleas, we agreed on a compromise. Kyle would confront Madison, but the rest of us would be present, just out of sight, ready to intervene. My father insisted on including my mother, believing she had an absolute right to know what was happening, to hear the truth from us. We gathered in my parents' suite, the luxurious room now feeling like a trap, sending a message to Madison that there was a family emergency to discuss, an urgent matter. While waiting for her to arrive, the air thick with suffocating tension, I pulled Kyle aside, my heart aching for him, wanting to shield him from the pain to come. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Cal?" I asked, using his childhood nickname, concerned about the hollow, utterly broken look in his eyes. No, he admitted, his voice raw, his gaze distant. But I need to do it anyway. I need to know. I need to hear it from her. Madison arrived a few minutes later, looking appropriately concerned, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, the very picture of a supportive new wife, ready to help her family through an unseen crisis. "What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes moving from face to face, carefully assessing each of us, her initial genuine confusion quickly replaced by a subtle, calculating wariness. "Has something happened?" Everyone looked so distraught. The room was thick with a suffocating, almost unbearable silence for a moment, the tension almost physical, before Kyle stepped forward, his body rigid with controlled emotion, his face a mask of pain and resolve. "We know, Madison," he said quietly, his voice dangerously low, almost a growl. "Or should I call you Erica? Or Catherine? Which name do you prefer these days? We have a lot of options now, don't we?" Her expression flickered for just a moment, a flash of profound surprise, quickly followed by a cold, calculating assessment of her surroundings, of the people in the room, then instantly back to concerned confusion, a perfect practice performance. It was so quick, so subtle, so expertly executed. I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it with every fiber of my being, my breath held tight. "Kyle, what are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice thick with feigned distress. "You're scaring me. What's going on?" Michael moved to the desk where his laptop was open, the glowing screen still displaying the damning evidence, a stark beacon of truth. "We have documentation of your previous identities, Madison. Marriage certificates, police reports, news articles about the men you've defrauded, the millions you stole." Madison laughed, but it was a brittle, forced, chilling sound, completely devoid of humor, almost a hiss. "This is ridiculous. There must be some mistake. Some woman who looks like me, perhaps. A case of mistaken identity." "No mistake," my father said grimly, his voice like cold steel, his eyes burning with a quiet, dangerous fury. "We also have undeniable evidence that someone installed sophisticated spyware on my computer during the wedding festivities. Someone who was trying to access my financial accounts. Someone who was physically present at this venue, Madison. Someone who now had access to every password and account number I own." Madison's eyes narrowed slightly. She glanced towards the door, assessing her options, a flicker of genuine, raw alarm in her gaze, a predatory animal caught in a snare. "Don't even think about it," I warned, my voice cutting through the tension like a razor, my fear transforming into cold fury. "Security knows not to let you leave the property. Every exit is being watched. This was a complete bluff, of course. We hadn't actually spoken to security, hoping to avoid a full-blown public scene, but Madison didn't know that. "I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing," she said, her voice taking on a harder, more clipped edge, the practiced warmth completely gone, replaced by something cold and venomous. "But I won't stand here and be accused of crimes I didn't commit. Kyle, surely you don't believe these malicious lies? Not after everything we shared, everything we promised." Kyle's face was a mask of unimaginable pain, his eyes wide with a profound, agonizing heartbreak. "I want to believe you, Madison. More than anything," he said, his voice raw with anguish, thick with unshed tears. "My heart is screaming for you to tell me this is a mistake. So please explain it to me. Explain why there's a marriage certificate showing you married Lawrence Petton in Boston 4 years ago under the name Erica Donovan. Explain why there's another for Catherine Miller. Explain all of it." For a gut-wrenching moment, Madison maintained her facade of outraged innocence, her lips pressed into a thin, unyielding line, her eyes scanning our faces for any sign of weakness, of doubt. Then, seeing the unwavering certainty in our faces, the cold, hard, irrefutable evidence on Michael's screen, the unyielding truth reflected in Kyle's broken eyes, something within her snapped. Her posture changed, her shoulders squaring, her entire body language shifting, her expression hardening into something utterly ruthless. It was like watching a perfectly crafted, beautiful mask fall away, revealing something cold, calculating, and predatory underneath. "Well," she said, her voice entirely different now, clipped, cool, utterly devoid of emotion, with a subtle, unidentifiable European accent that sent shivers down my spine. This is certainly unexpected. I underestimated you, Dr. Mitchell. She nodded at Michael, a grudging, almost admiring acknowledgement of his intelligence. Most people, she added, her lips curling into a cruel smile, only see what they want to see, and they're usually so eager to believe in a fairy tale. My mother gasped, a choked, heartbroken sound, her hand flying to her mouth, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Kyle took a physical step backward, as if her transformation had struck him like a blow, a physical assault on his very soul. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, choked with raw, agonizing heartbreak. Was any of it real? Did you feel anything for me? Madison, or whoever she truly was, tilted her head, considering him, her gaze utterly detached, like a scientist observing an interesting specimen. Your company? I didn't dislike our time together, if that's what you're asking. You were a pleasant distraction. But business is business, Kyle. And you were a means to an end. And what business is that exactly? My father demanded, his voice thick with disgust, his face a mask of cold fury. Defrauding innocent people, destroying lives, shattering families. She smiled, a cold, utterly emotionless expression that never reached her eyes, a predator's grin. I prefer to think of it as wealth redistribution. Men like you have more than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. I simply help spread it around, help myself to a slice of the pie. You're a sociopath, I said disgustedly, my voice trembling with anger and revulsion, trying to contain the sheer rage bubbling up inside me. Where are your accomplices? The people posing as your family? They'll be caught. Michael pressed, his voice sharp, tactical. Already gone, she replied with a dismissive smirk, a flash of smug triumph in her eyes. They left last night, actually. Standard procedure after the main event. Clean up, cut losses, move on. They're probably halfway across the country by now. The calculated, casual way she spoke about the wedding, the main event, made my stomach churn, a sickening feeling of profound, utter manipulation. I couldn't imagine the agony Kyle was feeling, the utter hollowness in his chest. You won't get away with this, Alexandra, my father said, using her true name, his voice laced with an iron will. We've documented everything. The police will do what exactly? She interrupted, her confidence returning, a sneer twisting her beautiful, deceptive lips. Charge me with marrying a man who willingly gave me access to his life. I haven't actually taken anything from you, Thomas. Not yet. And Kyle signed a prenuptial agreement that's quite generous to me, as I'm sure you'll recall. A perfectly legal document that ensures my financial security. A prenup obtained under false pretenses, under a false identity, Michael pointed out, his voice sharp, his legal knowledge surfacing. No court would uphold it. It's fraudulent. For the first time, Madison looked slightly less confident, a flicker of genuine, palpable concern crossing her face, a chink in her armor. Perhaps, she conceded, her voice a little less steady, but prosecuting me would mean publicly admitting how easily you were all fooled. The press would have a field day with that story, wouldn't they? Prominent Chicago investor Thomas Reynolds nearly scammed by fake socialite. Is that the kind of publicity you want for your prestigious firm? The kind of embarrassment for your family? Think of your reputation, Thomas. The room fell silent, the weight of her threat hanging heavy in the air, a chilling reminder of the very real consequences. She was right. A public scandal of this magnitude could devastate my father's business reputation, causing his clients to question his judgment, to lose trust. But then, Kyle spoke, his voice stronger now, resonating with an unexpected, fierce resolve that pierced through his pain. You're forgetting something, Alexandra, he said, his eyes fixed on her, no longer with love, but with a cold, disgusted clarity. The other men you've conned. I'm guessing they chose not to press charges for the same reasons, to avoid embarrassment, to protect their reputations. But together, those aren't isolated incidents. That's a pattern. That's enough for federal charges, Alexandra. A pattern of serial fraud. The FBI will connect the dots. Madison's eyes flashed with momentary concern, a raw, primal fear, a true flicker of panic, before she quickly composed herself, her composure faltering only slightly. "Well, this has been fascinating," she said, her voice brittle. "But I think our relationship has run its course." She reached for her purse, which she placed on a nearby chair, already planning her escape. "I'll be leaving now. You won't find me, so don't bother trying. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually," my father said, his voice calm, chillingly so, as he slowly, deliberately pulled out his own phone, his face a mask of resolute fury. "While we've been having this little conversation, my security team has been freezing all my accounts and notifying the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're quite interested in speaking with you, Alexandra. They're on their way." Now real, unadulterated fear showed on Madison's face, stripping away the last vestiges of her polished facade, revealing a terrified woman underneath. "You're bluffing!" she shrieked, her voice cracking, betraying her desperation. My father simply held up his phone, showing an email confirmation from the FBI, acknowledging receipt of his information and confirming their imminent arrival, their active investigation into her and her network. "You have two choices, Alexandra," he continued, his voice like granite, utterly devoid of pity. "Wait here for the FBI to arrive and face justice. Or try running with nothing but the clothes on your back, because every penny, every account connected to you is frozen. Your operation has been exposed. Your accomplices have abandoned you. You are alone. It's over," he concluded, his voice final, resolute. Madison looked around the room, her eyes wide, darting from face to face, her composure crumbling entirely as the terrifying reality of her entrapment finally hit her. Her gaze, now filled with a desperate, animal fear, settled on Kyle. "I could have made you happy," she said, a final, manipulative whisper, a last-ditch attempt to weave her spell, to find a crack in his broken heart. "We could have had a good life together, a real one." Kyle shook his head, his expression a profound mixture of disgust and pity, a deep, irreparable wound in his soul. "None of it was real," he said, his voice flat, broken, utterly hollow. "You never even existed." The hours following our confrontation with Madison, Alexandra Petrovic, were a blur of intense police statements, exhaustive FBI interviews, and shocking revelations that peeled back layer after layer of her intricate deception. Her real name, we learned, was indeed Alexandra Petrovic, born in Belgrade, Serbia. She had been running confidence schemes since her late teens, a child prodigy of manipulation, eventually graduating to the elaborate marriage and investment frauds that had brought her into our lives. The FBI had actually been tracking her network for years, a sophisticated web of criminals, but Alexandra and her team had always been one step ahead, like ghosts in the system. Her accomplices, the people who had posed as her parents and relatives at the wedding, were professional con artists who worked with various crews around the country. Some had already been identified by law enforcement, but most remained at large, shadowy figures still operating in the underworld. Kyle was utterly devastated. The sheriff's deputies who took Madison, Alexandra, away had to physically support him as he watched his bride of less than 48 hours being placed in a police car, her once perfect face now contorted in fear and rage. The marriage, of course, would be annulled, declared legally void, erasing it from official records. But the emotional damage, the profound heartbreak and violation of trust, the deep, scarring betrayal, couldn't be so easily undone. We told the other wedding guests a carefully sanitized version of events, that Madison had misrepresented herself, and the marriage was being annulled due to irreconcilable differences that had come to light. Most assumed it was some kind of green card scam or a secret, scandalous past that had been discovered. Only our immediate family knew the full, terrifying, soul-crushing truth. In the days that followed, as the initial shock wore off and the numbness began to recede, we discovered just how incredibly close Alexandra had come to succeeding. The keylogger on my father's computer had captured enough information to potentially access accounts containing millions of dollars. Had Michael not trusted his gut, had he not meticulously gathered evidence, had we not intervened when we did, she and her accomplices might have disappeared with a substantial portion of my father's hard-earned assets, leaving him financially ruined and our entire family shattered, both emotionally and economically. I still can't believe I was so blind, my father said, a week after the wedding, sitting in his study, staring out at the familiar vineyard view, now forever tainted with the memory of deception. I'm supposed to be good at reading people. It's part of my business, my livelihood. She was a professional, Dad, Michael reminded him gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. This is what she does, what she's been doing for years. She targeted your specific vulnerabilities. You can't blame yourself for being human. I keep going over every single moment, every conversation, every glance, Kyle said hollowly, his voice devoid of its usual energy, thick with a deep, crushing depression. He had moved temporarily into my parents' house, utterly unable to face returning to the apartment he had shared with Madison in San Francisco, an apartment now haunted by a phantom love, a cruel, beautiful lie, trying to see if there were signs I missed, trying to find any sliver of truth. There were signs, Kyle, I acknowledged, my heart aching for him, wanting to take away his pain, to undo the terrible damage. But they were subtle, cleverly hidden, designed to be dismissed. And she was a master at distraction. The important thing, the only important thing, is that she didn't succeed. You are safe. Dad is safe. The FBI investigation revealed that Madison, Alexandra, had been planning this particular con for over a year, a meticulously crafted, long-term scheme. She had specifically targeted Kyle after identifying our father as a high-value mark. His investment firm managed over $300 million in assets, making him an incredibly attractive target for her sophisticated operation. She had created an elaborate backstory, a complete fictional life, complete with fake social media accounts going back years, and had paid actors to pose as references who could vouch for her if anyone checked, weaving a tapestry of lies so intricate it was almost impossible to unravel. The most chilling discovery, however, was a storage unit rented under one of her aliases. Inside were detailed files on our entire family, our habits, our preferences, our vulnerabilities, our financial connections, our social circles. She had studied us like specimens in a laboratory, meticulously looking for the best way to infiltrate our lives, to gain our trust, to exploit our love for Kyle. It was a terrifying testament to her cold, calculating evil. In the months that followed, our family went through a difficult but necessary period of healing and rebuilding. My father, shaken but wiser, immediately implemented enhanced security measures for all his accounts and business dealings, his once unshakable trust now tempered with a healthy, protective skepticism. My mother, ever the caregiver, threw herself into supporting Kyle, arranging therapy sessions, making sure he wasn't alone with his thoughts for too long, patiently helping him piece together his broken heart. Michael and I stayed in Chicago for 2 weeks after the wedding, a silent vigil of support, before returning to our own lives. We called Kyle daily, sometimes just sitting in silence on the phone when he couldn't find words to express his pain, our presence a quiet comfort. Slowly, gradually, day by day, things began to improve. 3 months after the wedding that wasn't, Kyle made a decisive step towards healing. He decided to move to Chicago to be closer to family, a tangible, physical act of leaving the past behind. He found a challenging position at a tech company downtown and rented a small, comfortable apartment near my parents' house, rebuilding his life piece by piece, brick by painful brick. 6 months out from that fateful day, he went on his first date, a casual coffee with a woman from his new workplace. It didn't lead to anything romantic, but it was a crucial step toward normalcy, a flicker of hope that the capacity for connection, for real love, hadn't been extinguished within him. A year after the wedding, we gathered for a family dinner. It wasn't a celebration, exactly, but a quiet, profound acknowledgement of how far we'd come, how much we'd endured, how much we'd grown. Kyle was smiling again, truly smiling, telling jokes, talking about a promotion at work, his eyes finally holding a spark of his old self. My father had begun to trust his instincts again, though he now had a healthy, protective skepticism that hadn't been there before, a valuable lesson learned. You know what I've learned from all this? Kyle said as we finished dessert, looking around at our faces, at the love that had weathered the storm, now shining brighter than ever. It's not that people can't be trusted. It's that trust has to be earned over time, through genuine connection, through transparency, not given away in a rush of emotion, not blindly. And real love doesn't try to separate you from your support system. my mother added softly, her hand reaching for Kyle's. It strengthens those connections. It builds new ones. It doesn't isolate you. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, his warmth a comforting anchor. In a strange, unexpected way, the ordeal had undeniably strengthened our marriage, too. His instincts and persistence had protected our family from utter disaster, and my trust in him had never wavered, even when the accusations seemed impossible to believe. The case against Alexandra Petrovic is still making its way through the legal system. She has been connected to at least 5 other similar scams across the country, a web of shattered lives and stolen fortunes, and prosecutors are confident she will face significant prison time for her calculated crimes. Some of her accomplices have been identified and arrested, though the elusive man who had posed as her father, suspected to be the true ringleader of the entire operation, remains at large, a shadowy figure still being hunted by the FBI, a testament to the ongoing nature of their insidious network. As for our family, we had emerged stronger and wiser, scarred but not broken. The experience had taught us invaluable, albeit painful, lessons. To trust our instincts when something feels wrong, to look beneath perfect surfaces for the messy, complicated truth underneath, and most importantly, to hold tight to the genuine connections, the unconditional love that sustain us through life's inevitable challenges. We had been targeted because we were a close, trusting family, vulnerable to manipulation. But in the end, it was those very same qualities, our fierce bonds, our unwavering support for each other, our shared belief in truth, that had ultimately saved us. Our family had been tested, severely, tragically, but not broken. And Kyle, though still healing from a wound that would likely never fully close, has begun to look toward the future again, with a quiet strength, with hope in his eyes. The woman he had loved might never have truly existed, a phantom woven from deceit, but the capacity for real, enduring love within him remained intact. One day, we believe, he will find someone worthy of that precious, resilient gift. If you've ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't quite right about someone, whether it was a stranger, a friend, or even a family member who seemed utterly perfect on the surface, I hope you'll remember our story. Trust your instincts, look beneath the surface, and remember that real love, unlike the counterfeit version, can withstand scrutiny and stands the test of time. Have you ever faced an experience where your intuition warned you about someone who seemed perfect, only to discover a hidden, devastating truth? What happened? Share your story, your thoughts, or your advice in the comments below. I truly want to hear what you think, and your experiences might just help someone else who's feeling that cold prickle of doubt. And if this story resonated with you, if it helped you in any way, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, protecting yourself and your loved ones starts with awareness, with trusting that quiet, insistent voice inside. Thank you for listening, and I wish you relationships built on genuine trust, unbreakable love, and undeniable truth.